So, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'd love to welcome Helen, who is a financial advisor, and I'm really excited to have you on, Helen. How are you?
Very well, thank you for having me.
Good, good. So Helen's going to chat to us today around kind of female financial planning and protection. And I feel like this is a really important aspect of kind of the 360 care that we give at Be Lively, because actually finances are a real anxiety for a lot of people, a lot of stress for people, but also it can really directly impact our health, particularly for women, because actually we don't get to put as much into our financial pot as we get older. And actually that can really impact the care that we can get as we get older. And so but I think there's a lot of old misconceptions about finances for women, and actually I want to kind of debunk those with Helen today, so that we can be a bit more financially secure, you know to to reduce our anxiety and stress, but also to protect our health in the future too. So speaking about that gap, Helen, what are the kind of main reasons behind that gap for women? Particularly because they are like particularly the main carers within their families, and how can women kind of try and avoid those issues?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head that there does seem to be a real imbalance between sort of the financial provision that men have available to themselves, say at retirement, compared to women. And it's not just that men tend to earn more than women, that there's more to it. So certainly, if you consider that you may reduce your hours or take a career break when you have your children, it's quite often the case that it's the women that look after older relatives, so that reduces sort of time working. And also, even with the menopause, I think there are people, and I'm learning more about this, that are feeling less able to work or work at the level they did. So you've got there sort of during three stages of life, less ability to work. Um, but all it probably would take is a more switched on employer to sort of enable work and sort of these care situations as well. And you and I both know that you can work and look after a family and things
Yeah,
like that. The other thing I think is very noticeable is that there's such a small proportion of women in higher level jobs, sort of in careers of power. I think women quite often limit themselves and maybe don't have the confidence to put themselves forward for the different roles. So it's twofold. It's not being able to do both, and it's confidence. And I was talking to a lady yesterday who was saying she's going through menopause at the moment. Her confidence is so much less, and sort of we have self-doubt a lot, I think, during our careers and as sort of um, women generally. But then if you throw in sort of the hormones that come
yeah.
then, or lack of hormones, and that has more self-doubt. So I think they're the reasons why. Having said all that, a little bit of education and support, and you can make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I think when I look at my nan and growing up, like she worked part-time, and like her pension pot is like tiny,
Yeah.
compared to my granddad's. And that now that my granddad's gone, yes, she gets part of his pension and all
Mm.
of that, but at the same time, the choices that she's going to have to make, particularly as she gets older, and the care that she's going to require, she's not going to get the standard of care that someone else who has been
No.
paying to, a pot.
And
And
you'd like to think we have moved on from your nan's generation. And what I really hope to sort of empower women with the message is don't let a well-paid husband be your best financial plan. It
no,
terrifies me that that might be people's only option
and
to
that does
being
put us,
okay long term.
yeah, and actually that puts us in a really vulnerable position, because actually we then might tolerate really shocking relationships, and we feel like actually we've got no escape from that relationship, because we've all our security is put in that individual. And
Yeah.
and I think it
I
does.
read an article about it was around menopause because I was writing a piece for a menopause coach, and it's part of the reason to sort of manage your finances is to give you control back, and so you don't have to stay in an unhappy relationship.
Mm.
And I find, like, when I started being a financial advisor, never in my life did I think that these are the sorts of conversations I would be having, and I sort of hadn't bought into the sort of the need for sort of my friends, my sisters, my community to get this advice, not because everyone needs a pension, because that doesn't resonate with anyone. It's actually around taking control and empowering yourself so that you know what life looks like going forward as best you can.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's really important. I think that kind of leads us on really into, you know, what sort of financial options are there for women who, you know, because I think sometimes people might think, oh, I can't get financial advice because that's expensive and, you know,
Mm.
that's not going to, you know, be accessible. But equally, I think it's still important to be aware of what your options are in terms of protecting your income, you know, having the security that you need in the future. So, yeah, can you sort of talk us through what you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I mean, I think there is a massive misconception that you have to have money before you seek financial advice, and it really isn't the case. And shouldn't be the case. Arguably, people have lots of money, probably don't need the advice. They know how to get the money, look after the money. They're probably pretty well sorted. Um, but in the last, well, since I've been working in financial services, you can see advice becoming less and less accessible for sort of normal people
Mm,
walking into a bank. There's no bank to walk into. If you find a bank to walk into, there's no financial advisor. So it's become less and less available, sort of in an obvious way.
mm,
And one of my greatest things is to try and make sure financial advice is accessible to all. Um, as sort of when you train to be a financial advisor, the thing you are told is the biggest priority is protection. You talked about protection. And again, this is a huge area, particularly if you are reducing your hours or giving up work for whatever reason, whether it's caring for children, caring for elder relatives, or not wanting to work. I mean, we that is an
yeah,
option as well. But by not working, you lose your benefits that you ordinarily have as an employed person. Same if you go self-employed for the flexibility that you need around your
yeah,
children. So
yeah,
as an employed person, you will have death in service, which is essentially life cover. Life cover is such a cheap sort of thing to have and to give yourself protection. And it means if the worst happens, that there is a lump sum paid out to your family to make life easier. And if you have the scenario, say, where your husband, he is the breadwinner, he's working full time, you tend to look after the children because of that split. You are
yeah,
the main caregiver. You make sure it all works. You tidy, you do the school run, you cover the holidays. If you're not there to do it, then what does your husband do? He either has to pay someone to fill that role, or he has to reduce his work hours to cover it. So, as a non-working parent or a parent working less, life cover is imperative, and
yeah,
it is not expensive. Another area you can look at is critical illness, and that is, it's important to say it's before any diagnosis that these protections are available. But then if you do get a serious diagnosis, it pays a lump sum that allows you to maybe seek alternative therapies that aren't necessarily available
mm,
via the great care you would get with the NHS. It would allow you to take time off work. It would allow you to go on a brilliant holiday, to do something fabulous while you recover with your
mm.
family. So that's something that is more expensive, but again, it should be considered and sort of looked at.
And I
So
suppose
protection,
the earlier you do it, the cheaper it is. Is that true?
absolutely true, absolutely
Yeah.
true. And the sad thing is, we are like more likely to get sick than die. Well, I mean, I guess that's a good thing. So we're less likely to die as an outcome, but sickness and serious illness does affect so many people. And yeah, being savvy and getting it early, and if it's affordable, but you can quote
Yeah.
to make sure it's affordable. you
Yeah.
might not, you can cut your cloth accordingly. So if you think, well, I've got to spare £20 a month, so I can quote on £20 a month worth of cover,
Yeah.
and that's fine. You can get that, and it's just a something, and it gives you that peace of mind. And I say this quite a lot. I obviously, if someone is diagnosed with something awful, or if someone loses their life, I can't help, but I know that the financial pressure that that can bring can
Yeah.
make that grief and that sadness so much harder to deal with. And
Mm.
if I can take that away, then that is sharing the load of
Yeah.
such an awful time. And
Yeah. And
I think that that's important.
yeah, and I think for women, like women are more likely to have illnesses earlier on in their life. Like we do deal with a lot, particularly with our hormones and, but we are more likely to get cancer younger than men.
Yeah,
Men tend to get them much older. And we live with chronic illness much longer. So we obviously we live longer, but we live
yeah,
longer with more health conditions. Um,
okay.
and so, for anything like, I
God, it
obviously
doesn't sound great, does it?
no, I know. Like I think it's just all the stuff we've got to do,
Yeah,
Helen. Like it's just it's
just
too
really
much.
tired.
But on that note though, I've had this conversation with you in the past, and it's like, all the stuff we do does not get recognized. It's only, when it comes to like, financial planning and stuff like that, I think men are quite fixated on the what you can bring from a monetary perspective into the household.
Yeah,
And so that
yeah,
when you're getting cover, particularly as a couple, and I had this with my husband, and he was like, "Oh, well, if you die, then we'll only just get half the mortgage paid off because I'll still be working, and so
yeah,
it's not so much. But if I died, then you need it all paid off because
yeah,
you're the mum, you're going to be looking after the kids." And I was like, "Okay, so when I die, if I died tomorrow, what are you going to do with the kids?
yeah,
Like all of the stuff I do, you're going to have to do and work full time. Is that viable?" And he's like,
yeah.
"No." And I was like,
Mm,
"So you're going to have to pay, like you say, pay someone to do it, or
yeah,
you're going to have to reduce your your income or your hours." And
yeah.
so actually paying off the mortgage or having a lump sum that's going to help support you to look after the kids so that they
Mm.
can have at least a normalish upbringing without their mother around,
Yeah,
having their father and not sort of palmed off.
I think women struggle to see their sort of financial value if they're not the breadwinner. I know it's something I personally have really struggled with. So I mean, I met my husband sort of later in my 30s. I had my own house, I had my own money, I was winning at life. Few years have been a bit stop-start because I've had my two children quite quickly together and sort of working part-time and haven't been putting as much into the house account. And it does impact how you feel about your sort of value,
Mm,
not as a person, it doesn't run that deep, but sort of because you don't have a monetary value in the same way. But then I think you can miss, like exactly how you've explained it, m misunderstand what your actual financial value is.
yeah.
And we don't all have prices on our head. But essentially, we are doing a full-time job
And providing
that
free
needs to be
care.
covered. There is a cost of that,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so we absolutely do have value, and it's really important that we realize it. And again, you talk about the what ifs for years, don't you? But like, oh, it never happened. Like you hear about people passing away, getting sick when they're younger. You're like, nah, nah. And then literally in the last few years, I lost two friends who weren't yet 40, and
Mm,
it's just changed my viewpoints, and
mm,
I think it's made me a better financial advisor. Um, and I hope there'll be like a ripple effect around me of people getting the advice they need and
yeah.
just feeling safer and more protected
Yeah.
because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So leading on from that really is looking at sort of some practical tips then that we as women can do to sort of stay financially secure, particularly if we do, like we said, the likelihood is very slim, but it does happen and we do have
Yeah.
ourselves protected. So if we do become ill or terminally ill, and you've already
So,
mentioned the two main
yeah, I
ways, but
mean, we I think the things to do is try and address things before they happen,
Mm.
because there are far more options available to you before it is an issue. So seek the advice, um, sort of talk to someone. Don't let sort of talking about money and finances put you off and be scared. I think it's partly because we're very British, so we don't want to talk about money, but also because I think women particularly can feel a little intimidated by the idea of a financial advisor. I think there's a bit of a dated sort of impression of these sort of old men in pinstripe suits rocking up and using a load of language you don't understand. And whilst women advisors still few and far between, I think a statistic of about 16% of advisors are women. The tide is turning, and hopefully that makes it women more comfortable to talk about their finances. So I would absolutely try and get that advice as early as you can. Um, it, but if you are in the sort of situation where you already have that diagnosis, I would review what you have. So look at your savings. It might be that you have policies that you didn't know you'd taken out with mortgages. Quite often, a mortgage advisor will put life and critical illness in as part of it. You may even have some protection with loans and things that you just didn't really know. You just ticked a box, or it's
Okay.
just a conversation you've had previously. So check what you have. You may have protection that you weren't aware of. I would sort of be very open with your employers, find out how they can look after you, how long your sick pay is.
Mm.
Quite often you sort of get 6 months full pay, so 6 months half pay. So look into sort of what's there for you. Um, if you have very bad news, I would look into sort of if you are employed, if what the death and service policy is.
Mm.
Does it pay out on news of terminal illness as opposed to waiting for the worst to happen?
Mm.
Things like that. So there are things that you can absolutely look at. Um, look into your benefits that are available to you. There is support from the state, albeit um, it's hard on benefits, but it is funding nonetheless.
Mm.
And also you could consider, and again, it depends on personal circumstances. You've got equity release, so if you own a property, there's value within that. We obviously have to look at the bigger picture and sort of protecting our families and our
Mm.
spouses, but depending on situations, it may be an option there as well. But I
Mm.
think in those situations, just talk
Yeah.
and sort of don't be afraid to not have those conversations. I hope as part of our sort of chat today, more people will have this conversation with all things sort of scary health related. We can
Mm.
shove our heads in the sand, and in none of these things, that is not the best approach. Like it's so just
Yeah.
deal with the scary stuff as quickly as you can, and before things get worse.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think.
Like I probably thinking about just because I was just thinking as you were talking. So like if the worst did happen, I suppose having the conversation around wills and things like that is really important,
Yeah.
protecting your finances once you're gone.
Yeah, and it puts your
Considering
wishes there as well. And
wishes,
so
yeah.
I think absolutely look at wills. I mean, we haven't touched on pensions at all, but pensions can be passed between spouses. So
Mm.
um, sort of we've talked about the whole don't make your financial plan for your husband, but their pensions, assuming you stay married, do become yours and vice versa.
Yeah,
So that's another conversation to be had. Sort of what pension pots do you have, and
yeah.
you can pass them to your spouse, you can pass them to your children. So there are things you can do with
No.
regards to your pension as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. And are there any like places that people can look to, sort of get more confidence with their finances, like just either obviously seeing you, but if that's not
Yeah, I mean,
accessible or,
obviously, I would love people to want to touch base. And one of the real advantages in a post-COVID world is people can talk to me wherever they are. We're not limited to, do you live around the corner? Can you get to my office? So it's a great sort of part of work. It allows us to be flexible as working mums, but it also is makes the whole accessibility piece far better for people needing that advice. But you can look online, you can Google sort of things about pensions and stuff. But I think that's where the language can get sort of quite intimidating. And I would always say talking to a person is best. You want to make sure you've got the right protection. There's lots of different sorts of protection. You need to know what's right for you. There's sort of pensions. You may actually have a final salary pension, in which case the rules will be slightly different to sort of employee benefits pension, sort of like a flexi pension. So there's different things to look at, and actually if you aren't working or if you've reduced your hours, you may want to make additional pension contributions, because you can make pension contributions if you're not working, but it would be quite hard to know what direction to go if you're just looking it up online, because there's fund selection as part of that. We review your risk, so it can be quite full on to seek it yourself. So it is out there. There is information, but there's not a sort of bite-size sort of this is how to do it, and so financial advice would always be recommended.
And there are, like, I'm just thinking, definitely ones that you can pay for, but like citizens advice and things like that, are they have
they can't give advice, so they can
okay.
point you in the right direction, but they're not advisors. So they can give you some information, and they can I'm sure go through sort of benefits available and things like that, but they wouldn't be able to actually advise you.
And I think it's similar for anyone that has any health issues, like Macmillan do really good sort of financial support as well. In terms of seeing what benefits you can have, in terms of if you aren't able to work, or if your illness has made you sort of protected under the sort of disability side of things. So I think those are really good places to try to. And then I think when it comes to your own finances, like protection, again, it's kind of like a low-hanging fruit, isn't it, in terms of protecting your finances and life cover, and then looking into critical illness cover as a and then looking at a pension, because I know as a woman myself, I've had quite a few jobs in my even in my shortest life of 35 years, but you end up having pensions here, there, and everywhere, don't you? So so I think maybe looking at streamlining that to make sure you're getting
anything to make life easier and give you that peace of mind that you've got all your ducks in a row, and that you can look after the people you love. Absolutely.
Because I think in my I dread to think, like, if I did die very soon, my husband would just literally wouldn't know, because he's just like, where's all this information? I think, like you say, you definitely need to you can't put your head in the sand about this. But it's so hard, isn't it, when you're juggling everything else, and then to like sit through all these bits of paper that don't particularly mean much, in terms of,
no, it doesn't mean a lot, and it's also, let's be honest, you're just like, really, do I have, like, is this the job I've got to do? But that's why you need me to do the dull job.
No, I totally agree. And I think even just having to talk to someone, I know you do you do like initial consultations or anything like that? Just
absolutely.
have a chat, or
so I face to face, or have a phone call or a Zoom like this, and we can just see where things are at and look at what the needs are, because everyone's needs are going to be different. So initially we'd have a bit of a chat, and then we'd have a sort of more structured conversation where I start sort of pooling together information. If we decide to proceed with the advice, we'll tell you sort of the cost implications of that, and what the implications are going forward, expectations. So if it's protection, it's going to be a monthly cost to yourself. There's no sort of fee as such for the advice. That's all covered by the provider, but you pay a monthly fee for that protection.
Mhm.
If you say in the sort of scenario where you just want to get all your pensions in one place and start contributing to them again, then I would give you the cost of that ahead. So any client would know what the cost involved is with setting that up,
Yeah.
and whether you want ongoing management, so ongoing support of that, and you can pay an ongoing fee, or you just want it all tidied up and done, but you're happy then to just sort of let it tick over.
Yeah. No, that sounds amazing. And I think, yeah, it's just clear, because I think sometimes people just don't know like what that entails. So again, that's just a
No,
barrier to then going, oh, it just seems more scary than what it is. Than actually is, and it's good to just actually have a professional that actually helps you do that. And yeah, but I think women should be more active in their finances. And I think if they, having that open conversation with their partner, to do that, whether they have, if their partner, earns more money than them, or, doesn't, or they're equal, I still think it's really important to have the conversation around finances and kind of where you
yeah,
sit, and, and actually where you feel your value lies, isn't it? In terms of
yeah, I think
that,
so.
because I definitely made my husband think about his perspective on what I brought to the table. And if I
Yeah,
wasn't around, and he was like, oh, I didn't really think of it like that. He said, I was so interested in the pounds. I didn't really think about the,
yeah,
the actual, all the stuff that you do. Um,
yeah.
and I think, yeah, when you have that
And it
conversation,
is appreciated, of course it is. I mean, I think like we're possibly giving guys a rough deal for not real sort of making out they don't realize
no,
where we are, but it's working out what that means from a sort of financially safe point of view. And I think women need to be brave and
yeah,
just sort of take the bull by the horns and address their finances.
yeah,
And it won't all be solved in one meeting necessarily. It might be, and I have clients that I then deal with yearly for years and years and years, and
mm,
then often start talking to their families as well. So
yeah,
sort of looking at passing wealth on, or sort of looking at how, I mean, often if there's people are worried about how their families will cope
mm,
with sort of the finances because they're not used to it either. So sort of
yeah,
you bring in the whole education piece really, and the awareness
yeah,
to the younger generations as part of it. And I think that's really, it's a really lovely element of my job that I can sort of, it sounds a bit naff, be on this journey with
yeah,
people and sort of have start these conversations, but work with them over the long time so everyone is in a far better financial position, but it's all talked about, everyone knows what
yeah,
the expectations are of each other
yeah.
and where things are at.
No, that sounds amazing. And yeah, I think we can end there. I think that's amazing. And but I've got one more question actually that I don't always ask. I didn't give you in preparation for this. It was a bit of fun, Helen. So don't worry too much. But if you could have dinner with three people, dead or alive,
Oh
who
no.
would they be?
Oh, this is harsh. I would like to have dinner with George Ezra so he could serenade us.
Oh,
Um, he did my, like, he was our first aunt when we got married a few years ago. I would like to have my nan because she passed away before I met my husband and had my kids and stuff. So I'd just like to fill her in
yeah.
on where things are at. And um you for stitching me up. You can come to
Ah,
dinner. I can't think of a
I
third.
get free dinner.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully I'll, have some interesting conversation,
Yeah, don't let me
But
down.
no, I won't, well, I talk about vaginas for a living, so
I
I'm
mean,
sure
what's
I
not to
can
love?
bring the tone down or up, whichever.
Sure, my nan
So,
would be thrilled.
yeah. Hopefully she doesn't have false teeth, does she? We don't want them falling out in front of Georgia.
No.
So Thank you so much,
Conversation's
Helen.
gone very wrong. It was going really well when it was financial advice.
Yeah. Oh, I know. But thank you so much. I've really learned a lot from that, and I hope
No, well,
anyone
thank you for
listening to
having
this.
me.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.